Hello and welcome to the Car Care Auto Reviews channel, and welcome to the 2024 Mazda CX-5, a model that should start showing its age at this point. It's been around for a while and they're continuing on business as usual. However, in today's video, we want to find out if in 2024, with all the newer models coming out and SUVs and whatnot, is this truly showing its age in a bad way or in a good way? We're going to do a proper technical review, take a look underneath it, around it, inside it, some things we like, some things we don't like, to find out if this is still a relevant car, even though it's a little bit of an older design in 2024 or not, right after this. Let's start our technical review with the engine. Now, you've seen Mazda and other models, they're moving towards inline six and kind of different configurations or experimenting with other things. This one is still old school. When I say old school, it's almost an insult to it. This is not old school. This is a marvel of engineering. When you really look at the technical data, this, when it came out, this engine was a masterpiece, and it still is. This is the 2.5 liter engine, 4-cylinder. So they have two iterations of this engine. They have the turbo and the non-turbo. Difference between them, of course, one of them is turbo, one of them is not, but actually pretty similar. Compression ratio is different. Something about this engine and compression ratio, that is the biggest thing with this engine. That's the whole Skyactiv G thing. Has a Miller cycle. Things are completely groundbreaking compared to any other gasoline engine. Now, maybe in 24 we have some newer engines that are getting nicer. But let's dig into this engine. So, plastic valve cover. This does have dual overhead cams. It does have an aluminum cylinder head. It does have roller rockers and hydraulic lifters, which is very nice. This does have a very cool, and they were actually one of the first to do this, electronic variable valve timing on the intake. So the way this works is the gear, the timing gear, it's a two-piece timing gear with kind of another gear inside of a gear. So there's an electric motor on the outside. It just sits, it drives the inner gear, which then can change the outer gear. So when this motor speeds up faster than the camshaft, it's going to advance the timing because it's going to spin faster, and then the outer gear will spin and it'll advance the timing. If you spin that motor slower, you're going to actually go the other way and retard the timing. If you spin it at the same speed, your base timing, nothing's changing. They're both spinning at the same speed, everything's staying stationary. Revolutionary design. We've actually seen this design in many other manufacturers are starting using something similar to this. The exhaust, variable valve timing is just oil control, nothing about that, very simple. Actuator in the front, nothing about it. Something about this engine that is special, that's the Miller cycle. It's not an exact Miller cycle, but it is a Mazda Miller cycle, if you would. So when the piston is kind of coming down for the intake stroke to pull air out of the intake, usually when it reaches the bottom, it starts the compression, the valve closes, and we do the full stroke of the length of the bore, and that was your cycle. Here, it'll keep the intake valve open to push some of that air back, and then it closes late, so you have a short compression stroke and a very accurate one. This way, the engine can actually spray less fuel, and it's precise and exact. That's why this engine had direct injection only. That is a good thing and a bad thing. Direct injection only, lack of maintenance or specific driving habits, you could build carbon. And there has been actually Mazda engines with carbon issues because of the way they're driven. You don't want to do short trips with these engines, repeat it. You want to watch your oil changes. You want to use decent fuel with these cars. And the biggest thing is the short trips in cold weather. They will really start building up carbon. That's one thing you gotta watch for. Speaking of the direct injection, this have 4 direct injectors, not on top of the valve cover, they're on the side. The high pressure fuel pump, it is not on the valve cover, it actually sits a little bit to the side. So pulling a valve cover is very simple on this, it's just wide open. There's a few valves and whatnot, but overall it is very basic. This engine is turbocharged turbo sits all the way in the back, a little bit of a tighter spot, but again, the intake is in the front, which somewhat makes up for it. Now, this turbo, has a vacuum controlled wastegate, which is the old school way, it's a simple way, it's the better way. But the intercooler is air to air, and has to do with the age of this car. See, some of the other iterations from Mazda, this engine in other models, some of them did have a liquid to air intercooler. This one has an air to air. Good thing is, it's simpler. It's just a pipe runs so a small radiator, comes back. That's about it. Downside is there's a lot more piping, and a lot more in the front, and kind of component wise. However, turbo engines, that is one thing you gotta watch for. Maintenance is key with this engine. And going back to the Miller cycle, we talked a little bit about the compression. The compression is rather high in this engine. That's one of the things that they had to do to accommodate that Miller cycle. So they actually pushed the envelope with this engine. Not in the US model, in the European model, they really went overboard with the compression because the emissions allowed them to. However, this engine requires its maintenance. It's a very high-tech engine. And because of this high compression deal, there has been cases of head gasket issues. And the reason for that is you just have high compression. It's a turbo engine, although the non-turbo engine has a much higher compression. But this turbo actually boosts this engine to 17.4 psi. That's a little bit on the high side with an already high compression engine. So maintenance is key on these engines, folks. You may hear things about them. They are truly marvels of engineering. I mean, the things they did here, it's just, we can go on for days, but let's keep it simple because they didn't actually stop with the engine. They did something with the transmission that is very cool. The Mazda CX-5 for the transmission, unlike its competitors, which are either going to have a 17 million speed transmission or a CVT, or worse, a DCT, a dual clutch transmission. This has a 6-speed transmission. And someone wonder, wait a second, are they stuck in the past? No, they're actually stuck in the future. They figured that a CVT doesn't match the driving dynamic of this car. And a 17 million speed transmission is just too much. Too big, too heavy, too complicated, kind of intrudes in the driving experience. And then a DCT is just, yeah, that's not a bad idea in an everyday car. So they did this. They took a regular 6-speed transmission, torque converter, nothing really special about it. They made it better. And the way they made it better, the reason they made it better is efficiency. See, if you just put a 6-speed transmission, it doesn't have the ratios to really give you the most efficient powertrain. So what they did here, they took the torque converter, which normally a torque converter is a fluid coupler, has a clutch, it engages at higher speeds, and life is good. They made that clutch much heavier duty, where you can engage it a lot more at much lower speeds. And they gave the computer a lot of control over that clutch. So every time as soon as you take off, after a little bit, it'll engage that clutch and it'll stay there until you come to a stop. Not a lot of manufacturers do this, folks. This is a truly unique way of keeping a 6-speed transmission where you don't need many gears, but making it efficient. This is one of the things that if you drive a CX-5, you will feel that transmission. It's very smooth and very direct feeling. It doesn't feel like it's slow and mellow. No, it's direct, but it's not jarring at the same time and like just you feel every shift. No, everything is smooth and refined. That's how it feels. And that part, they really did well. They didn't put a CVT, they didn't put a 17 million speed transmission or a DCT. They did it even better. Now, looking around here, and initially, when we looked at the first Mazda we reviewed, of course, not the very first one that came out, I liked everything I saw under the hood. They're high quality. This is, I think, the first car that came out of the Ford era of Mazda. This is their own engine. Things are going back on track. However, there are a few things that are not bad things, but interesting choices. Let's call it that. For example, if you look right in this area, there is a coolant bottle, plastic, very plasticky coolant bottle. I love the clamps that go to it. I love the hoses that go to it. They're all proper hose with a proper clamp, not some quick disconnect plasticky thing. And even the plastic itself, the truth have to be said, is a high quality plastic. But I have two concerns with that. First, the radiator cap is on that part. That radiators are plastic as well. We can put a radiator cap, that's not a problem. But what is a problem is that same plastic bottle has the engine cover hook on it. So usually what's going to happen in the future as these get older, every time you pull the engine cover, you potentially crack that and break it. And you have to replace it. I hope not, but that's how these things start. I just wish they would have put that somewhere else. That would have been nice. That's probably the only thing I dislike about here, other than turbo being in the back, but that's for heavy service. If you take care of this, I hope you don't have turbo problems, but that's the only things. Otherwise, I really like everything I see. I mean, down to the plastics, down to everything, how everything is laid out. It's really good quality stuff here, folks. We review a lot of cars, and some of them just make us wonder, how do these cars make it out in the world? You look at this, and this is proper. Now, this is showing its age, and there's one thing about 2024 model that you have to know. Yes, this is not the coolest inline six in the world, but this compared to the inline six is very basic. I can't believe we're saying that. This is nothing basic, but still, compared to the inline six, this is basic. But for 2024, because of the supply chain and all this stuff that's going on in the world, there was a decision made from Mazda. It's very interesting. So any CX-5 made after October, November of 23, a 24 model, does not have I-stop and does not have cylinder deactivation. Two things that are known to, one of them is known to not make engines last long, and the second one potentially will not make engines last long. I-stop is start-stop technology. So if you really dislike that, you have to shut it off every time you get in the car. Well, if you buy a Mazda CX-5, it doesn't have one anymore. And same thing with cylinder deactivation. Just thought I'd mention that because this is actually listed in the technical changes for 2024. And I thought it was pretty interesting. I would totally go for that because nobody likes stop-start technology and nobody likes cylinder deactivation. So there you have it. Buy a CX-5 made after November of 23 and you won't have either from the factory. Let's take a look underneath the 2024 Mazda CX-5. Now there are a few things here that I love. First one is, this is entirely covered up. That's pretty standard. But you notice they leave you the service areas separate, so you don't have to remove the entire cover. But not only that, most manufacturers do this. They leave you one for the coolant. That is really nice, folks. This little stuff makes a big difference for us. And that is really appreciated. The other thing is, most manufacturers, they'll have this as a bolted on piece. This is just a little mud flap so things won't splash and whatnot. But this one is molded in. And that is pretty cool. That these usually fall off and they're bolted and they look horrible. This one is really nice. Now moving on to the front here, we got a McPherson strut design with a very over elaborate dampener. So if you look at these things, all they do is dampen some of the vibration. And you do have the front sway bars, they are steel, but just from these red things in the back of it, that is actually a plastic inner socket. Honda uses this, Mazda uses this. They're okay, but they don't last very long time, and that's what the downside of them is. Control arm is steel, and it does have the ball joint as kind of integrated in it. Wish that was not the case. Wish it was a separate design that would make it much better for service, but it's not the end of the world. But it is a steel knuckle. This is where the Mazda CX-5 is starting to show its age. I love steel knuckles, but they are using aluminum in the newer cars for weight savings. Of course, it makes a huge difference, but for service and longevity, that's actually a better option. Dual piston caliper in the front. Even though this is really not a big car, you look at a lot of its competitors, they have a single piston caliper, much smaller brakes. This has a dual piston caliper, and the brakes are really confidence inspiring in this, which is nice. Now we move back here. I love how everything is covered up to the edge. Very high quality stuff. The exhaust is okay. Not the worst, but not the best either we have seen. But I like how this shielding is high quality. Things have a quality to them. A quality, even in other Mazda models, the newer ones, we're starting to see change. This is still kind of, this is where older stuff sometimes are better because they're moving away from the heavy like heavy materials and the things that really feel solid into stuff that are softer for weight savings. I don't blame them. I mean, they have to at some point. And stuff like this doesn't make a big difference, but it's nice to have it. Let's put it this way. Now, the drive shaft is, of course, a wheel drive model. Drive shaft is tucked all the way on top. Does have this big brace right here that covers it. Pretty cool, compact design. The drive shaft goes over the exhaust, and you notice the exhaust runs kind of underneath it, and that's pretty nice. Now, the fuel tank is a saddle fuel tank. You see it right here, but it has this very, I really like this shield. If you ask anybody, this is totally overkill because this is perfectly fine, but they put this very strong cover here that covers just the area where the drive shaft and the exhaust is. And then we get to the rear differential. So this is one of those that the disconnect is here, or the clutch is here, that engages or disengages the all-wheel drive, and the front transfer case is always spinning. Very small differential. So the word we're going to use for this is, it's a cute little differential. It works. This is not the car you're going to take off-road. Some light off-road, some weather, but not heavy off-road. So this system is actually pretty simple, pretty rugged. There's not much to it. It's all aluminum. And we've talked about this previous model. This one seems like this is what's going to catch and rip this entire thing out if you do decide to take it some off-road. But they put this, of course, as a cooling fin, and that's why it's there. Now, the CX-5 does have a multi-link rear suspension, but there's something about it that is slowly disappearing from the automotive industry. It's all steel. Trailing arm is steel, all the other arms are steel, knuckles steel. I mean, it just looks like you're going to look at it now, and we're going to look at it the same way 20 years from now, and we're going to be good. I like it. This is how the automotive industry is changing, and looking at a car that 24 that kind of kept the old school ways. It really looks nice. But not all old school ways are good. If we look around, this has electronic parking brake, so you don't have the rotor head drum and kind of the shoes and all that complication. You just have a little motor. Worst that can happen to it is you misservice it, and that's important that you know that these require specific procedures to back them off, reset them when you replace the brakes. But other than that, it's pretty standard caliper. There's nothing about it. See, this is what I see in new cars. All this is wide open. Look at this one though. It's a car that comes from a little bit back. It's not completely covered, but it does have some covering. Same thing on the other side. It does have some covering. Noticing newer models that just redesigned, this is wide open. This one doesn't have that, because this one, when we say it's showing its age, it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes what comes with age is wisdom. They've been doing this, it's been working, and it hasn't been kind of watered down by the new requirements. This kept things a little bit on the older side, but not the bad older side, the good older side, in my opinion. Let's take a look at the outside and the inside of the CX-5. Although not much have changed since the last one we reviewed, but we still want to go over it. As this Mazda CX-5 ages, and we've said this in a previous review of this car, it has a classic, timeless look. I love it. It's the best way to describe it is less is more. Because really, when you look at it from far away, it just has this angry look. But actually, when you look at the finer details, there's not much going on. Let's look at some of those details. For example, the headlights. They're very small, and they're just a headlight. They have these little halos inside of them, and that's it. There isn't an over-elaborate headlight, but it looks so elegant and classy. You can consider it sporty, you can look at it elegant, depends which trim you look at. And then the grille. Yes, it is a little bit of a big grille with a massive Mazda logo on it, but it looks nice. Now this particular color, this stuff is a matter of taste. I am sorry, Mazda, I don't think it's a nice color, but moving past the color, if you look at the hood features, there's actually not much going on. There's just one line. Goes here, it continues actually on this front piece here, and that's it. There is not 17 lines that disappear and go, no. It's very simple. And then you look at the side. There is this line, this curve, which I think this look gives it its distinct look. This curve that here is not there, but here it starts, and then it slowly fades into the body. This gives it a very distinct look. It almost makes it have a high shoulder, if you would, or hip, however you look at it. Now, the wheel arches are not body color, but they're not also just flat plastic. They are piano black, which is better than some other manufacturers the way they do it, but I wish it was body color, and some of the higher trims they are. Mirrors. Again, big mirror. Doesn't have a tiny little mirror. It has a pretty big mirror, and I love that. It is a little bit on the too big side design wise, but I like how they didn't make it this tiny little mirrors so it looked cool. No, they retain the function, and that's what I like about it. Now, the doors, they do have a button, so you don't have like a touch sensor. This is one of the things that I wish they would have changed. It's only in the front, not in the back. Understandable, although Mazda is moving towards the luxury side, and this, not luxury, especially in 24, but this is where things are showing their age. Speaking of the inside, let's take a look at the inside. Now, not much have changed in 24. However, there are a few things that we should highlight. This interior is, for lack of a better word, also timeless. And the reason it is timeless is it's functional, it's purposeful, and has a few unique features. The distance in this dash is not big. When you sit in the driver's seat, the glass is not very far away from you. You don't feel like there's a giant field in front of you. No, you're close. Gives it a really interesting driving position. This pillar is a little bit on the big side because you are so close to it. It can be a little bit of a blind spot. But other than this, I love this interior. I don't love it because it has this futuristic, wowing design. No, it's functional. It's nice, but it's functional. The vents are kind of interesting. They're lower. Usually when you sit in cars, you feel like the vents are higher. This one is lower, and the HVAC controls, which are all physical, they're lower as well. Shifter is physical. All your infotainment controls are here, not on the dash, which I love this rotary dial for the volume. This is a great idea. If they would have put it here, it would also work, but here works great. You as a driver has direct access to it. Your passenger also has direct access to it. By having kind of all the infotainment controls here, both you and your passenger can access them without having to reach over or do all that. I love that. That's intelligent design. Now, something about the infotainment system, it is touchscreen. And it is wireless Apple CarPlay, which is really nice. You still have the rotary dial, so you could still use it because the reach is a little bit. Remember, this was designed at a time where we didn't have touchscreen for Mazda, but now it does. But it is far, so you still have the rotary dial should you need it. Now, this particular trim is the carbon trim, which now it returns for 2024, and you have these very interesting seat colors. Again, matter of taste. Not my choice, if I would say that, but they're there should you want them. I think the black insert is really what takes from it, but again, it's a matter of choice. But the seats themselves are very comfortable. The steering wheel controls are very simple. Now, the gauges, you have two big physical gauges, and in the middle is kind of a screen that mimics a gauge. It works perfectly fine. It's not overcomplicated. It's not over the top. It shows you what you need, nothing more and nothing less. And I love that. Now, continuing on our outside tour, going to the back, I think this is a good-looking car in the back. I really like the taillights. When we look at this back corner, there's something about cars that have a short bumper, SUVs. They just look right. I really like how this car looks. It is aging really well. And you can still see some design cues from this era of Mazda into their newer cars. But here's where aging is not always a bad thing with cars. See, majority of modern cars, they're losing their bumpers. I mean, you usually have zero bumper. Just the back door is your bumper. This one, while it doesn't have a huge one, still has a bumper. There's a little bit of real estate between the back of the car and the door, which is a nice thing. You do have a wiper right here. the one thing I wish they would have softened on, Mazda CX-5 all-wheel drive Skyactiv G Turbo. Now I know the Skyactiv G is a big deal, and it is a big deal and something I should be proud of, but I feel like the badging is a bit much. That's just my idea of it, but we can live with that. Let's take a look at the back here. Power door with the motors integrated into the shock. This is pretty much have become the automotive industry standard, unless you look into some dinosaur from the past. This is the new stuff. Back storage here, pretty decent space. You do have some intrusion from the wheel wells. Now the slope of this does take a little bit of your storage space, but if you notice, the slope doesn't start until higher up, so you do have decent storage here for a car of this size. Underneath here, old school, of course, you have a spare tire, and not only a spare tire that the cavity of the spare tire is used as a subwoofer from the Bose sound system, which is it's a great idea, because you have this giant cavity that you could use for the subwoofer. That's a great idea. So we've seen manufacturers put the subwoofer right in this cavity and take all the space from you. Well, they didn't do that. They actually repurposed the spare tire for the subwoofer. That's a great idea, I think. Now, storage here, and this is when you fold the seats down, this is something I love about this. You can fold each individual seat from here. Very simple. This handle remind you of like car door handles from the 90s. We used to have styles like that. But it's so simple to fold the seats down. And I love that they're not 60-40. They are individual. Now, you can't put this down because my seat is all the way back, but if you want two passengers, but you have something tall that you want to put here, you can. And here's the best part. If we come around, they'll open the door because they can bring the camera around. So some folks will assume that this is an armrest. Oh, we fold this down to have an armrest. Well, actually, that's not the case. You do have a proper armrest with its own storage, with some USB chargers here. That's smart engineering, folks. And in the back seat, this is my driving position. I'm 5'7". Got actually decent knee room. It's not the biggest in the world. I have decent headroom, even though this has a sunroof. But the nice thing is, if you look at the back of this seat, the color, well, I'll leave that one up to you to see it, but it's all wrapped in leather, all around. See, newer cars, this is expensive to do in these days. So they only stop till here. They either put a plastic insert or they put a different material. No, this one has the exact same material all around the seat, which is nice. This is a little nice stuff that you get in cars that are slowly going away. Let's talk about some things I do not like about the Mazda CX-5. Full disclaimer, this is one of my favorite Mazda models, and actually one of the cars that I respect the most. So finding things I don't like about it is getting a little tough, and they're really improving little things as we go. But nothing is perfect in life. There are a few things. First thing is the door handle. So most cars in this segment, you have a touch sensor. So you just grab the handle, the car unlocks, and we go in. This one has a button that's kind of getting a little on the older side. And it does, especially if you're used to other cars and you come to this one, you have to press a button to lock it and unlock it. I wish they would have changed that with when they updated it to it. They didn't, and that's okay. And the next thing is, because of the seating position. Now, I love the seating position, don't get me wrong. But because of it, the A-pillar does block a little bit of your drive. That's one thing you will want to notice and be aware of. I mean, you can just slightly move your head and you're okay, but that is something you want to watch for. When you go test drive one, if you're considering buying one, check that. If that bothers you, it depends how tall you are and everything, that might be a real issue. And the last thing, and this is something we've kind of talked about with previous reviews of the CX-5, they did do some tweaks to the suspension. However, this car can be a little bit on the jumpy side, especially if you're driving like a flat road with some dips and kind of imperfections in the road. You'll feel it bouncy. The one thing have to be said in the 2024 model, that is less. It is noticeably less, but it's still there. And that has to do with the wheelbase being short. Now, there are other competitors that have a short wheelbase. They don't have that, but I think that is the fine line between the way this handles, because this handles really nice. It's very confidence inspiring. No sports car by any means, but it is considerably better handling than some of its competitors that are more softer and kind of mellow, especially at highway speeds. This feels very composed, while others feel too soft. That is the compromise, I guess, between the two, is that you have a slightly bumpy ride. The Mazda CX-5. Folks, I have said this in previous videos when we reviewed various iterations of the Mazda CX-5. This is one of my favorite Mazdas, and it still is. Because there is a certain thing about this car. It has some old feeling to it. Not in a bad way, in a really good way. Mazda is moving towards the luxury side. But you know what the best part is? This is one of the cars they actually really did it well. Because you get in this car's competitors, they either have a CVT or they're very loud. This one has everything that the competitors have, but it's quiet and it's refined and it handles very well. It drives very nice. It has a powerful engine, especially when you go with the turbo model, but at the same time, it's good on gas because it has a lot of technology. I mean, this engine is groundbreaking when it came out. And today in 2024, yes, there's a lot more technology from Mazda and from others, but it's still groundbreaking. It's just a beautiful engine. And the other thing is the rest of the car. They really designed this car in a conservative way, in a way that is functional, sensible, timeless. The looks on the outside, the looks on the inside, and the function remains very relevant in 2024, even though this is a little bit of an aging model. And you know what? Looking at the sales number here, people see that as well. And if you're wondering about the CX-5, you look at the newer models from Mazda and you look at this one, is this just kind of the last one to be updated? I think they're holding off for a reason and for a good one. This is a really good car. Now, no car is perfect, of course. The A-pillar, because of the seating position being forward to give you better visibility, it is a little bit obstructing, especially if you're not used to a car that you sit in this particular position. The second thing is, it's a very small thing, not really a big thing, but I have to say it. Mazda's moving towards the luxury side of things, and I wish they would have updated the entry. So when you come to the door and you want to enter, you have to push the button to lock it, to open the door. Wish they would have put a touch sensor. That was something very simple, and they do it in other models. They don't, and the competitors of this car will have that in the higher trims. So I wish they would have done that. They got the infotainment right. It is touchscreen. It is wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. They got a few things, but the biggest thing, folks, if you are considering a 2024 Mazda CX-5 built after November or somewhere around there, it doesn't have iStop. It doesn't have cylinder deactivation. They say due to supply chain issues, and they may add it in the future. That's actually two features most people really dislike. They usually do them for emissions, but if you're shopping for a CX-5, I think 2024 after November production of 23 is the best year to buy. Beautiful car, still one of my favorite Mazdas ever. We'll see if they come up with something that catches our interest more, but this still is one of my favorite Mazdas. Folks, I hope this video was helpful and informative. I hope you learned something new. If you like it, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some of my other videos. Until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.